The Roman Dodecahedron, a mystery no historian can solve. Close your eyes now. Let your body grow heavy like a stone sinking into soft earth. Feel your shoulders loosen, your breath slow and deep. Let the day slip away from you. I want you to rest, to drift. And as you do, we'll travel together into a place where time doesn't quite work the way it should. But before we go further, tell me, where are you listening from tonight? A quiet bedroom? A train moving through the dark? Somewhere far away where the wind hums against the windows? I'm here with you, wherever you are, and the story is waiting. You're standing in the hush of twilight. The air is cool, and the last rays of the sun brush the tops of ancient stones. The world feels still, so still you can hear the sound of your own heartbeat. In the grass ahead, something catches the fading light. A glimmer, faint but insistent, like the blink of a distant star. You step closer, slowly, as though not to disturb the air around it. There, lying half buried in the damp earth, is an object unlike anything you've ever seen. Its surface is bronze, darkened by centuries, but still warm under the touch of the dying sun. 12 perfect faces, each pierced by a circle of a different size. At every corner, a small knob, like the rounded bud of a flower. The holes are not random, you feel that, even without knowing why. They are deliberate, measured, exact. And yet, no inscription, no sign of its maker, no name. You crouch down, resting your hand near it without quite touching. The air around it feels different. Not cold, not warm, but charged, as though the space itself remembers something. A breeze drifts past, bending the grass, carrying with it the faint scent of rain on old stone. Your fingers itch to lift it, to feel its weight, to hold its silence close to you. Somewhere inside you, an old feeling stirs. Not memory, not quite, more like recognition. You have never seen this before, and yet it feels as though it has been waiting for you. You imagine the centuries it must have lain here, seasons passing overhead, frost and thaw, rain and summer heat. The grass growing tall and then dying back again, and all the while this quiet shape, unchanged, untouched by the noise of the world. You lift it now, slowly, letting the weight settle into your palm. It is heavier than you expected, not just in mass, but in presence. You turn it in your hands. The light slides along the edges, pooling in the holes, flashing briefly on the knobs before vanishing again. You tilt it, hold it up to your eye, peer through one of the smaller circles. The world beyond is framed in perfect bronze geometry. The wind stirs again. It brushes against your cheek like the breath of something ancient. You close your eyes for a moment and hear it, a faint hum. Not loud, not clear, but real enough to make your breath hitch. You open your eyes and glance around, but the world is empty. Only the object remains, its silent music, filling the space between moments. And then, quietly, the question rises. Why is this here? Why does no one speak of it? Why would something like this survive, when its story did not? The thought settles in you like a stone in still water, sending ripples through your mind. You picture an empire long gone, its roads worn to dust, its cities turned to ruins beneath the roots of forests. You imagine the hands that made this, skilled, certain, guided by knowledge we no longer hold. The grass whispers against your legs. A bird calls once, far away. The bronze glints again, almost as though the sun is reluctant to leave it in shadow. You feel yourself swaying slightly, as though drawn deeper into the quiet that the object carries with it. You think about all the things the earth keeps hidden, coins from forgotten reigns, bones from creatures that have no names, maps to places that no longer exist. And now, this. It feels alive somehow. Not in the way of breath or heartbeat, but in the way it listens. You sense it could be turned to face the sun at certain times of the year, that its holes might catch the light in patterns we no longer know. You think of how many nights it has lain beneath the stars, how many winters it has endured without rust or decay. The hum is gone now, replaced by the soft sigh of wind over grass. You hold the dodecahedron close for a moment longer, feeling its weight anchor you, as though it connects you to something deep in the earth. Then, with slow care, you set it back in the place you found it. Not because you don't want to keep it, but because you feel it does not belong to you alone. It belongs to time. The sky is darker now. The first stars are appearing, faint but steady. You stand and watch them emerge, one by one, the air cooling around you. Somewhere in the distance, water is moving. Perhaps a river. Perhaps just rain sliding down stone. You draw a slow breath, letting the night settle into your chest. You do not yet know the name of what you have found. You do not yet know the story, but you will. For now, the only thing that matters is the quiet, and the way the world seems to be listening with you. And so, you take one last look at the shape in the grass, the bronze edges catching starlight now instead of sun. And you turn to walk into the waiting dark, carrying the question with you. The kind of question that does not fade when you sleep. The kind of question that might follow you into dreams. So let your eyes close now. Feel the bed beneath you, the weight of your own body sinking deeper into rest. Somewhere, out there in the quiet, the Roman dodecahedron waits still. And maybe, just maybe, it remembers you. You wake as if you never left the field, the night soft around you, the hush unbroken. Your body loosens again, breath slow and smooth, and the world narrows to the feel of air on skin and the memory of bronze in your palm. The grass has a way of holding silence, of laying it across your shoulders like a cloak. The dodecahedron rests where you placed it, half in shadow, half in starlight, as if it belongs to both. You kneel without hurry, letting your knees find the cool earth, and you notice how every edge of the object seems to drink the light and give it back in calmer form. It is not loud, it is not demanding, it simply is. And that is the first realization. Some things do not ask to be known, they wait to be understood. You reach out, and this time your fingers meet the bronze with no hesitation. It is warmer than the air, and that warmth spreads through your hand, up your arm, like a gentle lantern moving inward. The knobs under your thumb are smooth, rounded, comfortable, as if made to be held during long, patient watching. You lift it again, feeling the balance settle, and the night becomes a frame for the shape. 12 faces, 20 corners, a hollow center that seems to be more than empty space, more like a pause in the metal, a room where meaning could gather. You tilt it so that a small circular aperture aligns with the star. The star becomes a bead of light resting in the hole, steady and precise. You let your shoulders drop, and the rhythm of your breath matches the rhythm of the sky. Something gentle unfolds inside you. Perhaps it is a memory pretending to be new, or a new thought wearing the clothes of memory. You sense that the person who first shaped this did not work in a hurry. They would have stood near a furnace, listening to the rise and fall of flame, judging heat by colour and by the echo of metal on stone. They would have carved a mould with quiet care, laid in the pathways for bronze to flow, and waited, always waited for the right moment. When the casting cooled, they would have lifted it with tongs and turned it the way you turn it now, searching its faces for small secrets. Whether they spoke Latin or a rough provincial tongue, whether they lived by a river or on a cold hill, you feel them here, close as breath. That is the second realization. The distance between now and then is thinner than it seems. You raise the object to eye level. Through a larger hole, the world softens and loses its clutter. The field becomes a dim sea. The stones become islands. The sky becomes a slow river. When you move the object a fraction, the star slides from one hole to another like a note passing through the throat of a flute. The fit is not perfect, and yet it feels intentional, like a teaching tool chosen by night. It suggests a way of looking, a way of measuring without numbers. Perhaps it once taught someone when to plant, when to call the village to gather, when to light a ceremonial fire. Perhaps it taught where to stand to see the first edge of spring. Perhaps. Your mind drifts not toward answers, but toward shapes of questions that make the night larger rather than smaller. And then the question sharpens. It arrives without fanfare, simple and clean. Why would such care produce something with no name left behind? Why would an empire that wrote down so many things leave no words for this? You hold the device a little closer, as if the bronze might whisper back. The wind answers first, slipping across the field, stirring the dry stems, brushing against the knobs. The sound is soft, like a far-off river. You think of libraries that burned and monasteries that fell quiet, of roads that faded into bracken. You think of how a single winter can erase the footprints of 100 summers. Perhaps the story was told, and told until one day it wasn't, and the silence spread like a slow tide over everything. Your breath is even now, the heaviness of rest curling through your limbs. You let the Dodecahedron rest in your lap and place both hands over it, the way someone might hold a sleeping bird. The metal's calm spreads under your palms. You can imagine a ritual, not grand, not forbidden, just steady. People gathered at dusk, children drowsy at the edge of the circle, elders watching the horizon. A person lifting this object, aligning one hole with the sinking sun so that its light passed through bronze and fell as a coin of fire on a marked stone. Not magic, not trickery, just a conversation with the sky. And yet, if you had never seen it, would it not feel like a secret? Would it not feel like the world telling you something in a language you almost understand? You set the object on its side and watch how it does not wobble. It settles as if the earth makes room for it. You notice faint tool marks along one edge, barely visible, like whispers left by hands that shaped it. The bronze smells faintly of rain and time. You listen for the hum you thought you heard before, but what comes is the quiet thrum of your own body at rest, heart and breath moving like a tide. You let the sound carry you, adrift in it, unafraid of the distance it creates between one thought and the next. Each gap is a doorway, and each doorway opens to another field, another night, another watcher lifting the same mystery. And again the question nudges you from the edge. Why did its name vanish? Perhaps the name was never meant to be written, only shared mouth to ear, safely contained in gatherings where the wind erased the words as soon as they were spoken. Perhaps the people who used it believed that naming the thing too loudly would pull it down from wonder into mere habit. Or perhaps the name was ordinary, something like The Measure or The Finder. So ordinary no one thought to copy it into law or tale. Historians might debate. Records might suggest. You linger with the maybes not to escape truth, but to sit with it long enough that it chooses to sit with you. The sky leans deeper into night. A thin cloud drifts, veiling the stars, then passing on. You bring the object closer and look through a smaller aperture. The world beyond sharpens, a star pinned in the circle with tender accuracy. You move your head, barely, and the star escapes, reappears through the next window. The motion creates a rhythm. Find, lose, find, lose. It feels like learning to listen. It feels like following a voice that speaks only when you are very quiet. You think of the stone, the shadow, the silence. You repeat the trio in your mind like a charm. The stone, the shadow, the silence. Each word settles in a place behind your ribs where worry cannot reach. You imagine other hands now. A farmer, calloused, testing the fit of thumb and forefinger. A legionary warming it by a small fire to watch the holes catch sparks like trapped constellations. A child holding it up and laughing at the way the world becomes a puzzle of circles and dark. A healer aligning it with the moon to time a long breath. A priest lifting it for the equinox. The circle of light touching an altar's edge. These are only shades of people, half seen, but they feel near. If you were to speak, they might turn their heads. If you were to sleep, they might keep watch. You lower the device to the grass and lie back beside it, the earth steady beneath your spine. The field is cool, the scent of damp green rising up as the night deepens. You feel each muscle loosen, one by one, until your body belongs to the ground the way a stone belongs to the riverbed. Above you, the stars are patient. You let your gaze soften and see how the dodecahedron becomes part of the sky, its holes dark as little wells, its edges faintly luminous. The thought that arrives is simple and it stays. The object is not merely in the world, it is a way to look at the world. That is the third realization, and it makes your chest feel clear, like a bell that has just rung and rests now in the echo. You close your eyes and picture the shape in darkness, its faces floating like small doors. Behind each door a question waits. What season? What hour? What path? Perhaps the people who used it moved through such doors without naming them. Perhaps they trusted the wind to be their library, the sunrise to be their calendar, the rain to be their teacher. When the doors closed, when the bronze was buried or lost, the questions did not vanish. They drifted, waiting for someone to find the object and remember how to ask. You open your eyes and look again, not for answers, but for that calm way of seeing that feels like being held. Now the night bends closer. You sense the field beyond your vision, the uneven stones, the small insects nesting in stems, the slow sweep of clouds over distant hills. The bronze rests, content, as if it has returned to its element, not earth or air or fire, but attention. You allow yourself another long breath, deeper than the last, and you understand the quiet gift it offers. It doesn't fill the silence. It teaches you how to live there. It doesn't solve the mystery. It shows you how to hold it without strain. And so the central question, the one that caught on your ribs like a hook, becomes less heavy, more luminous. Why would such an object survive when its story did not? The answer, if there is one, hums in the distance, so the story can be told again by the ones who are ready to listen. You reach out, fingertips brushing a single knob, and the gesture feels like pressing a seal onto soft wax, not to claim, but to witness. The wind moves once more across the field, a long, even breath, and the bronze seems to nod. You shift, not with effort, but with the gentle surrender of sleep finding you by degrees. The edge of the object touches your palm, anchor and invitation, stone and shadow and silence gathered into a small luminous thing that has crossed centuries to lie beside you. Let your body sink. Let the night widen. Let the question glow, steady and kind, like a lantern left for travellers. And in that softness, you feel the next part of the journey stir, like a page turning itself. You will rise soon, and the story will step back in time, to fields that had different names and roads that shone with fresh rain, to a world where this shape first entered human hands. For now, let your eyes rest on the bronze, and let the stars rest on you. The moment of realization is not an ending. It is a door opening quietly in the dark, welcoming you through. The night has thinned into that fragile hour before dawn, when the sky is neither dark nor light, and the air carries a cool stillness that feels older than the sun. You wake, not with a jolt, but as though a hand has gently lifted you from a dream. The Roman Dodecahedron rests beside you, untouched, its faces glistening faintly with dew. You take a slow breath, the earth damp beneath your palms, and you feel the pull of the story, the need to walk backward in time, to where this shape first stepped into the world. You close your eyes, and the air changes. The smell of grass is replaced by the sharper scent of charcoal and molten metal. Somewhere nearby, fire roars low in a stone furnace, the sound folding into the steady murmur of voices. You open your eyes, and you are standing not in the modern field, but in a workshop lit by the orange pulse of flame. The air is thick with heat, shimmering above the forge. Shadows dance across the walls, long and soft, like the silhouettes of people who have been here for centuries. Before you, a figure works at a bench of rough-hewn wood. His tunic is plain, sleeves rolled back, arms marked with the pale scars of his craft. He is focused, each motion deliberate, as though the act of creation is itself a kind of prayer. He leans toward the mould before him, two halves of carved stone, their insides grooved and shaped with impossible precision. You see the outlines already, 12 flat planes, 20 corners, the delicate circles cut into each face. The furnace hisses as molten bronze is drawn from its depths, glowing like a piece of the sun brought to earth. The craftsman tilts the crucible, and the liquid light pours into the mould with a slow, controlled grace. There is no hurry, no wasted motion. Every gesture is practiced, as if learned from someone who learned it from someone else, each one carrying the weight of generations. You feel yourself holding your breath without meaning to, matching his stillness. The metal settles into the mould with a low, rich sound, not quite a hiss, not quite a hum. The craftsman steps back and waits. In the quiet, you hear the other sounds of the place, the creak of leather bellows, the crack of embers shifting, the faint rhythm of tools in another room. The waiting is as much a part of the work as the pouring. It is in this waiting that intention takes root, that the object begins to gather whatever quiet power will remain in it, long after its maker is gone. When the bronze has cooled enough, the craftsman lifts the mould and gently parts its halves. You see it then, the shape you know so well, but new, its edges sharp, its surfaces luminous with the sheen of fresh casting. He turns it in his hands, examining every plane, every corner, the way one might read a passage of scripture. His eyes are calm but intent. You know without being told that this object is not merely decorative. It has a purpose. Whether he understands that purpose entirely or simply trusts the tradition that brought it to him, you cannot say. Outside the workshop, the world moves in the rhythm of another age. You step into the light and see a Roman frontier settlement. Low stone buildings, roads paved with worn slabs, carts creaking over cobbles. The air smells of wood smoke, damp earth, and wool. Children dart between doorways, their laughter weaving through the morning. In the marketplace, traders from distant places set out goods, woven cloth, amphorae of oil, baskets of dried figs, coils of rope. The voices rise and fall in Latin and in local dialects, carrying news from far-off garrisons, rumours of unrest, and the everyday bargains of life. And yet, even here, where the ordinary presses close, the Dodecahedron does not feel out of place. You see one in the hands of a man in a dark cloak, speaking quietly with a group of others by the edge of the market. They handle it with the same careful respect you saw in the craftsman's workshop. One man holds it up to the sky, peering through a hole as though measuring something invisible. The others watch, nodding, their faces unreadable. The moment passes quickly. The object is wrapped in cloth and carried away. You follow them beyond the edge of the settlement, where the land opens into rolling hills. The path winds upward, through grass heavy with morning dew. The air grows cleaner here, thinner, touched by the scent of pine. At the crest of the hill, they stop. The man with the cloak unwraps the dodecahedron and places it on a flat stone, turning it until the morning sun slips through one of the holes and lands as a perfect circle of light on the ground. The others nod again, as if this confirms something. There are no cheers, no proclamations, only a shared silence, the kind that carries both reverence and certainty. You stand apart, watching, feeling the pull of 1,000 unasked questions. Is this a calendar, a navigational tool, a key to something more abstract, a way to speak with the cycles of the earth itself? You think of the fields that will soon be sown, the seasons that must be read with accuracy for survival. You think of the legions stationed far from home, needing to know the sky to find their way. Or perhaps this is older still, a practice absorbed into the empire from a people who were here long before the roads and the stone walls. The man in the cloak looks up toward the horizon, where the sun has fully risen now, washing the hills in gold. He covers the object once more, tucks it under his arm, and begins the walk back to the settlement. You follow at a distance, your steps slow, as though each one might wear away a little of the centuries between you. By the time you reach the marketplace again, the group has vanished into the flow of people. The air is full of voices and the clink of coins, and you realize how easily such a thing could pass through daily life, unnoticed by those who do not know its meaning. The craftsman is still at his bench when you return to the workshop. Another mould waits on the table, and the furnace glows steadily. You see now how many such objects might have been made, scattered across the empire's edges, each carrying its quiet function into the hands of those who understood. And yet you know the centuries will scatter them further still, into rivers, into fields, into the dark earth, until they emerge again in a world that has forgotten why they were made at all. The light in the workshop fades, the heat softens. You close your eyes and feel the centuries folding back around you, like layers of cloth. When you open them, you're once again in the quiet field, the modern world settling gently over you. The Dodecahedron is here beside you, but the air still holds the scent of that older time, the echo of voices speaking low over its bronze faces. You understand now that the first recorded discovery, centuries later, would be little more than a footnote to the lives it once touched. And so, as the day begins to bloom around you, you rest your hand on the object and feel the weight of its passage through time. The world may have changed beyond recognition, but the geometry remains, 12 faces glinting softly, each a doorway into a history that refuses to vanish. You lie back, the grass cool beneath you, and let the image of the workshop linger in your mind. The firelight, the molten bronze, the quiet care of hands that work not for glory, but for the enduring truth of shape and silence. Sleep takes you again, slow and steady, and somewhere between waking and dreaming the hum returns. It is not from the object this time, but from the memory of watching it come to life. It is the hum of something made with patience, carrying the rhythm of those who trusted it enough to leave no words, only the thing itself. The morning stretches itself thin. Across the field, the mist lifting in soft ribbons that drift toward the distant trees. You lie still, eyes half closed, letting the cool air move over your skin. The Roman dodecahedron rests beside you, beads of dew clinging to its bronze faces. It feels unchanged, yet the world around it hums with a new kind of attention. You know now that this is not the first time it has been found. Long before your hands ever touched it, before the grass bent under its weight this morning, someone else knelt in a different place, under a different sky, and drew it from the earth. It was 1739, or so the records say. A farmer in Aston, England, turning his soil for planting, felt his spade strike something solid. He thought at first it might be a stone, but when he crouched and brushed the soil away, what emerged was unlike anything he had seen in his life. The bronze was dulled with age, its edges softened by centuries underground, yet its geometry was unmistakable. 12 faces hollowed with perfect circles, 20 corners capped with round knobs. It caught the morning light and held it, as if reluctant to let go. The farmer turned it in his hands, his brow furrowed. It was too symmetrical to be an accident, too strange to be a common tool. He had handled many things buried in his fields before, old coins, rusted nails, bits of broken pottery, but nothing like this. And though the village was small, word travelled quickly. Neighbours came to see, their guesses stacking up in the air between them. A candlestick holder, one said. A gaming piece, another offered. A charm to ward off bad harvests. But the longer they looked, the more certain they became that none of these answers fit. The farmer took it to the local magistrate, who turned it over with the same puzzled expression. The magistrate kept it on his desk for some weeks, showing it to anyone who might pass through. A visiting scholar, a merchant with goods from the continent, even a travelling priest. Each examined it, weighed it, peered through its holes as though the answer might be hidden on the other side, but no answer came. Eventually the magistrate decided it ought to go to London, where, he said, people of learning might identify it, and so it travelled, wrapped in cloth, carried by cart over long, uneven miles, until it reached the British Museum. There it was catalogued, bronze polyhedron, probable Roman origin. The words were neat, official, and empty. No explanation followed. It was placed in a drawer with other oddments, an unassuming addition to the vast collection of empire. The records do not say if the farmer ever saw it again. Perhaps he didn't care. or perhaps he thought of it in quiet moments, the weight of it in his hands, the way it caught the light, and wondered if somewhere in some distant room someone had finally named it. You sit up in the field now, your fingertips grazing the Dodecahedron beside you. The sun is higher, warming the metal, and you feel that same quiet curiosity the farmer must have felt. The difference is that you know this was not the only one. More began to appear, scattered across Europe, one in France, unearthed in a vineyard, another in Belgium, found near the ruins of a Roman fort, others in Germany, the Netherlands, Hungary, even as far north as Scotland, always in the outer provinces of what was once Rome, never in the heart of the empire. The dates were uncertain, but scholars placed them between the 2nd and 4th centuries CE. Some were smaller, others larger, but all shared the same essential form. The variety of hole sizes, the rounded knobs, the hollow centre, each detail appeared again and again as though guided by a single design. And yet no Roman writer had ever described them. No merchant's ledger mentioned them. No military manual recorded their use. In the museum records, the descriptions grew longer but not clearer. Function unknown. Purpose uncertain. The dodecahedra were shuffled between display cases and storage drawers, admired for their craftsmanship but never fully explained. Visitors would pause, tilt their heads, read the label, and move on to the next exhibit. The objects waited, patient and silent, as they had for centuries before. You picture the people who first stood before them in those museum halls, the early antiquarians in powdered wigs, their curiosity bound by the theories of their time, the young students sketching their shapes into notebooks, the casual visitors glancing at them and deciding in a moment that they were unimportant because they are unexplained. You wonder if the dodecahedra noticed, if objects can notice, the difference between the gaze that lingers and the one that passes quickly. The official record remains the same today as it did in the 18th century. Roman bronze, purpose unknown. In that phrase lies a strange kind of reverence, though perhaps unintended. To admit you do not know is to leave the door open, and in that space the mystery breathes. You run your hand over the grass, tracing an invisible circle around where the object rests. Somewhere in a drawer, its brothers and sisters sleep under museum lights. Others still lie buried, their bronze faces pressed against soil and stone. The farmer who found the first recorded one could not have imagined that centuries later, people would still be asking the same questions he had. And perhaps that is the quiet power of it, to carry a question through time without letting it fade. The wind shifts, bringing with it the scent of damp earth, as if the past is moving close again. You close your eyes and see the farmer standing in his field, holding the strange bronze thing up to the morning sun. Behind him, the furrows stretch toward the horizon. Before him, the rest of the world waits, full of roads and markets and hands that will carry the object far from where it began. You can almost hear the low murmur of his voice as he calls his neighbours over, the way their footsteps rustle through the grass, the moment their chatter falls away into shared silence as they realise they're looking at something none of them can name. When you open your eyes again, the dodecahedron is still here, the morning light pooling in its holes. You lean closer, peering through one, and the world beyond bends into a perfect circle. For a heartbeat, you imagine that this is exactly what the farmer saw. The same alignment of light and form, the same small wonder that has no need of explanation. And then you lean back, letting the sun warm your face, and the thought settles in you like a stone dropped into deep water. Perhaps the purpose of the official record is not to give answers, but to hold the mystery long enough for the right eyes to find it again. You rest your hand on the bronze and feel its quiet patience, as though it knows the story is far from over. The sun has climbed higher now, stretching its light across the field in long golden beams. You sit with the Roman Dodecahedron in your lap, feeling its warmth grow beneath your hands. It is an unassuming warmth, like the way a stone holds the memory of sunlight after a summer afternoon. But as you turn it slowly, studying the way its holes catch the light at different angles, you begin to sense a pattern, not in the object itself, but in the places where it has been found. The pattern is quiet, almost shy, as if it would rather be felt than seen. You trace it in your mind like a faint map, its lines drawn in invisible ink. All the recorded discoveries of these dodecahedra lie in what was once the northern edge of the Roman Empire, the liminal lands, the border country where Rome met the cold breath of the outer world. You see the sweep of this line, from the hills of Scotland, where fog rolls in from the sea, down through the fields of England, across the green valleys of France and Belgium, to the dark forests of Germany, and eastward into the distant plains of Hungary. Not one has been found in Rome itself. Not in the bustling heart of the empire, not in the sun-drenched villas along the Mediterranean, not in the deep south where the air hums with heat and the soil yields olives and wine. They belong to the borderlands, and the borderlands alone. You imagine the roads that once linked these far-flung outposts, paved with stone straight as the will of the empire itself. Soldiers marched them, merchants rolled their carts along them, messengers on horseback carried news from one distant post to another. And somewhere along those roads, in the small forts and scattered villages, these bronze shapes were kept. Were they tools of the soldiers, instruments for the merchants, or did they belong to neither, kept instead by quiet hands that moved just outside the notice of power? You think of the frontiers, places of meeting and tension, where cultures mix and influence one another, but also where the empire feels most fragile. The winters here were harsher, the nights longer, the land less yielding to Roman control. It makes you wonder if the dodecahedra were not an imperial invention at all, but something older, absorbed into the empire the way it absorbed so much else. The gods of conquered peoples, their festivals, their local customs. The wind in the field brushes against your ear, and for a moment you hear it as footsteps. You close your eyes and see a figure walking along one of those Roman roads centuries ago. The sun is low, the air cold enough to make their breath visible. They carry a small cloth-wrapped bundle under one arm. The road cuts through open fields before disappearing into the shadow of a forest. The figure glances behind them once, then keeps walking. The bundle is not heavy, but they hold it carefully, as if the object inside is more precious than gold. In your mind, you follow them to a small settlement, no more than a cluster of wooden houses beside the road. Smoke curls from low chimneys, and the scent of peat hangs in the air. They enter one of the houses where a few others are gathered. By the light of a single oil lamp, the bundle is unwrapped. The bronze gleams, its face is catching the flicker of flame. No one speaks at first. They simply watch as one of the group lifts it, turning it in their hands, aligning it with some unseen point beyond the window. Perhaps they are measuring something. Perhaps they are waiting for the light to fall in a certain way. You do not know. All you know is that they treat it with a kind of deliberate calm, as though they are part of a rhythm that began long before they were born and will continue long after they are gone. The image fades, and you open your eyes to the present. The field is quiet again. You glance down at the dodecahedron in your hands and see it not just as a single object, but as one of many, scattered across these lands like seeds from an invisible hand. The idea that they belong only to the frontiers begins to take root in your mind, and with it comes a new question. Why would something so carefully made be restricted to the edges of the empire? The official theories, have tried to answer this. Some say they were surveying tools used to measure the distances or angles needed for building forts and roads in these more rugged lands. Others say they were related to agriculture, perhaps for determining the best time to plant in climates Rome itself was less familiar with. Still others suggest they had a military purpose, range finders for artillery, devices to calculate trajectories for the heavy stone balls hurled by ballistae. But these explanations, tidy as they sound, never quite settle the matter. No evidence links the objects to such uses. No diagrams survive. No mention appears in the meticulous military manuals Rome left behind. And so the question remains, stretching from Scotland's mist to Hungary's plains. Why here, and only here? You picture the map again in your mind, but this time the lines of the empire fade, and the land beneath returns to the way it was before Rome arrived. Forests stretch wider, rivers run unbound by bridges, hills stand unmarked by stone roads. The places where the dodecahedra have been found take on a different shape. Not a border, but a ring. It is not a line of separation, but a circle, enclosing something at its centre. The thought sends a quiet shiver through you. Could they have marked not the edges of the empire, but the edges of something older? A sacred geography, remembered by the people who lived here long before the legions came. Perhaps the bronze shapes were carried not to measure land for Rome, but to preserve knowledge from before Rome. Knowledge the empire could not, or would not, fully claim. The breeze moves through the grass again, carrying with it the faint scent of pine from some far-off wood. You think of the people in the settlement you imagined earlier, and how their small gathering might have been one of many, spread across a vast distance, each keeping a single bronze piece of a larger mystery. You think of how easily such gatherings could vanish from the record, their stories lost when the generations turned over. The sunlight deepens, warming the field, and you set the dodecahedron on the grass before you. It sits with quiet dignity, each of its faces catching the light differently, as though every hole is a small portal to another way of seeing. You realize that to understand it, you must think not in terms of one place, but in terms of many, each connected to the others by something more enduring than empire. And so you close your eyes once more and let the map fade from the inside of your mind. In its place rises the image of 12 faces turned to the sky, 20 points touching the earth, and the long, patient arc of history holding them in place like stones in a great, unseen circle. Somewhere, in the echo of those lands, the answer waits, not to be shouted, but to be found in the same quiet way these objects appear, unexpectedly, and always in the places where the known world begins to blur into the unknown. The field is warm beneath your palms now, the sun higher in the sky, but the dodecahedron in your lap feels neither hot nor cold, as if it belongs to a temperature of its own, untouched by the ordinary rules of the day. You trace your fingertips along one beveled edge, the bronze smooth where time has polished it, and your thoughts begin to circle the one thing that never seems to change, the contradiction at its heart. The contradiction is simple enough to put into words, but it grows stranger the longer you look at it. Rome left records for almost everything. Their engineers wrote in precise terms about how to build bridges strong enough to bear the weight of armies, aqueducts that could carry water for miles without losing a drop, siege engines that hurled stones with deadly accuracy. Their traders recorded prices, measurements, weights. Their scholars catalogued the stars, the plants, the illnesses of the body, even mundane things, recipes, jokes, the graffiti on walls, survived in fragments to give us glimpses into everyday life. And yet, here is the Dodecahedron. No mention in the manuals of engineering, no sketches in the pages of astronomy, no list of its uses in the accounts of merchants. Not a single Roman writer, not even Pliny, who wrote about almost everything, seems to have given it a name. You turn it in your hands, watching the sun flare briefly through one of the larger holes before sliding away. The absence of record feels deliberate, not in the sense of a conspiracy, but like a space that has been left blank on purpose, as if to say, this is not for the written word. Perhaps it was something understood without need for explanation, a common tool in certain hands, unremarkable to those who used it, but invisible to those outside their circle. And yet that idea feels wrong too. The craftsmanship alone demands attention. The precision of the circles, the uniformity of the knobs, the balance in its weight. None of this could have been the work of someone careless or indifferent. It was made with skill, perhaps with expense, and in a world as meticulous as Rome's, something like this would have had a place in the official order, unless it existed just outside it. The wind in the field grows softer, and you close your eyes, letting the thought pull you backward. You imagine a Roman engineer in a frontier town. Perhaps he has seen the dodecahedron used, perhaps even held one. He understands its value, knows it works for its purpose, but cannot fit it into the categories his education has given him. It is not in his manuals, it is not in his ledgers. He could try to write about it, but how? To describe it would be to admit there are things the empire did not invent, did not control. And so he does nothing. He uses it when needed, and when the need passes, he sets it down and says no more. The contradiction deepens when you remember how widely they are spread. If they were rare curiosities, perhaps their absence from the records could be explained by obscurity. But dozens have been found across multiple provinces over decades of excavation. They were not accidents. They were not one-off experiments. The design was repeated again and again, and still silence. You think of the museums now, of the neat glass cases where they sit on quiet display. The small placard beneath each one says almost nothing. Bronze dodecahedron, Roman, 2nd to 4th century CE, function unknown. The words are clean, precise, and utterly empty of life. They give the illusion of knowledge without the substance, as if the label itself is a kind of wall, a boundary between the object and the mind of whoever is looking at it. But when you see the object outside the case, in your hands, that wall dissolves. It becomes impossible not to imagine it in motion, held up to the light, turned this way and that, passed from one person to another. And the more you imagine it in use, the stranger the silence of the records becomes. The grass shifts around you, a whisper of movement that makes you open your eyes. For a moment, the sunlight on the bronze seems to brighten unnaturally, as if it is remembering something. You think about all the things Rome might have known but chosen not to preserve in writing. The whispered instructions of guilds, the unspoken knowledge of certain families, the rituals that relied on secrecy to survive. Perhaps the Dodecahedron was part of something like that, a tradition that lived only in practice, not in parchment. But there is another possibility, one that curls at the edge of your thoughts like smoke. What if the silence is not just a matter of secrecy, but of loss? What if the records existed once and were destroyed? Fire sweeping through a library, damp rotting a chest of scrolls, a careless scribe deciding that a page about an odd bronze shape was not worth copying when vellum was scarce. You think of how fragile the chain of memory can be. Break one link, a war, a plague, a single generation that fails to pass on a story, and the chain can fall apart entirely. The object survives because it is bronze, but the meaning vanishes because it was only ever carried in the breath of words. The contradiction then is twofold. It is strange that Rome never recorded these objects, and it is equally strange that none of the other cultures around them did either. The Gauls, the Celts, the Germanic tribes, all left behind artifacts and symbols, but no depiction of the dodecahedron. If it was important, it was invisible in more than one world. You lower the object to your lap, feeling its weight settle there, and the sensation is almost like holding a stone you've just taken from a river, worn smooth by its journey, shaped by currents you cannot see. The contradiction does not feel like a flaw in the story anymore. It feels like part of its nature. This is a thing that resists the net of words, that slips between the categories built to catch it. The sky has shifted while you've been thinking, the blue deepening, the air losing some of its morning softness. A bird wheels overhead, its shadow passing briefly across the bronze. You imagine someone 2,000 years ago seeing the same thing, the sudden dark shape gliding over the dodecahedron, the way the light returns as if nothing had happened. You imagine them thinking nothing of it, because for them the object was as familiar as the turning of seasons, and maybe that is the heart of the contradiction. For us, it is an enigma, a puzzle to be solved. For them, it might have been ordinary, useful, even indispensable, but no more mysterious than a plough or a lamp. And when a thing is ordinary, you do not explain it. You simply use it until the day comes when you cannot, until it is buried in the soil, and the knowledge of it is buried too. You run your thumb over one of the knobs and think about how much of the past is like this, not lost because it was hidden, but hidden because it was never thought of as something that could be lost. The contradiction is that we look for it in the official story, but perhaps its story never lived there to begin with. The wind stills, the field quiet again. You lift the dodecahedron to your eye, looking through one of its smaller holes at the distant trees. The circle frames a patch of leaves moving in the breeze, a small world inside the larger one. For a moment the contradiction falls away, and you feel only the pull of the object itself, as if it is reminding you that sometimes the lack of an answer is not a flaw, but an opening. And in that opening, something waits. Not a solution, but a path. A path that will lead you deeper into the tangle of ideas, the accepted theories, the discarded guesses, the wild possibilities whispered at the edges of scholarly debate. The contradiction will not close, but perhaps the edges of it can be traced. Perhaps the bronze rests again in your hands, heavy and quiet. You know the next step will be to follow the voices of those who have tried to explain it, the careful scholars and the dreamers alike. But for now, you let the sun warm your face, and you keep the contradiction close, like a coin you do not yet spend. The field hums with a lazy warmth now, the kind that makes the air shimmer slightly above the grass. You rest the Roman Dodecahedron in your hands, its 12 faces catching sunlight in shifting fragments, and you let your thoughts drift toward the voices of those who have tried and failed to give it a certain name. The official theories are like stones in a stream, solid, unmoving, but with water flowing past them, never fully stopping. They offer form, but no final shape. The first of these voices comes from the scholars who see in the dodecahedron nothing more than a candlestick holder. You imagine it on a wooden table, a small taper thrust into one of its larger holes, the flame flickering through the bronze geometry, casting strange shadows on the wall. It is an image that feels plausible for a moment. After all, the size and hollow nature could allow for such use. But as soon as you picture it, the thought begins to crumble. No wax residue has ever been found on any of the examples unearthed. No soot clings to their edges. They are clean, almost too clean, as if untouched by anything so ordinary as fire. Then there is the notion of them as children's toys, a game piece, perhaps for rolling, or some sort of catching game involving strings and holes. But you weigh the object in your hands and know immediately that this is a poor fit. The bronze is heavy, its edges and knobs too finely made for the rough play of childhood. It feels less like something meant to be thrown or dropped, and more like something meant to be held with deliberate care. The military theory comes next. The idea that these were instruments of war used by soldiers to calculate range for their ballistae or other siege weapons. You can see the appeal of this explanation. The varying hole sizes might allow for different angles of measurement, perhaps lining up a target in the distance through one aperture and viewing it through another. But the trouble lies in the lack of evidence. Roman military manuals are meticulous in their detail. They describe siege equipment with engineering precision. Yet not a single one mentions a bronze polyhedron. And if it were so useful, why would it be found only in the northern provinces and not at every outpost across the empire? The agricultural theory lingers at the edge of thought. Perhaps, some suggest, the dodecahedron was a kind of seasonal marker, used to determine the planting dates in regions where the Roman calendar did not match the rhythms of the land. You imagine a farmer standing in a muddy field, holding the bronze to the horizon, aligning the sun with a particular hole on a certain day, the angle telling him it is time to sow. It is a theory that carries a certain poetry, the union of geometry and earth, but again, the silence of the records presses against it. The Romans wrote about agriculture with great care. They valued the science of it. If such a device existed, would it not have been described in detail, celebrated for its efficiency? One by one, the official theories feel like keys that fit the lock poorly. They may turn slightly, they may seem close to working, but in the end, the mechanism remains unmoved. You turn the dodecahedron slowly, the sunlight catching in one of its holes and spilling a warm circle onto your palm. It feels as though it is waiting for something, not an explanation, but a recognition. You remember the first time you saw it in the museum, how the label's two small words, function unknown, seemed to stand taller than any claim could have. The object's mystery had not diminished in the year since. If anything, The neatness of those failed theories only sharpen the edges of the unknown. As the breeze shifts in the field, you close your eyes and let the voices of those theories fade into the background. In their place, you hear something else, the quiet certainty of the object itself. It does not argue with the candlestick or the toy, the weapon or the farming tool. It simply exists, untouched by the need to fit into the neat boxes of human thought. And yet, you can't help but imagine. The image of a frontier farmer holding it to the horizon returns to you. So does the idea of a soldier measuring the distance to a tree line where an enemy might be hiding. The human mind wants to fill the space, to drape meaning over the silence. You realize that perhaps this is part of the object's pull. It invites the gaze to try, and in the trying, it binds you to it. You set it gently on the grass beside you and lie back, staring up into the pale blue sky. You think of how the official theories have each, in their way, given a piece of the truth without holding all of it. The candlestick offers the image of light passing through the object. The toy suggests movement, play, and interaction. The weapon gives it a relationship to sight and distance. The farming tool ties it to cycles of the sun and earth. None are complete, but each holds a fragment, like shards of a mirror reflecting the whole in incomplete glimpses. Your breath slows as you let this idea settle. Perhaps the truth is not in choosing one of these uses over the others, but in recognizing that the object could have lived many lives. An empire lasts for centuries. An object might pass through dozens of hands, each one finding a different use for it. What begins as a ritual tool could become a toy in the hands of a child, then a makeshift candlestick in the corner of a soldier's tent. Over time, those uses might blur together until the origin is gone, leaving only the shape, as mysterious to the last owner as it is to you now. You turn your head toward the bronze again. The light has shifted, and the holes no longer catch the sun in the same way. It seems to change personality with the hours, as if reminding you that it cannot be pinned to a single identity. The official theories, for all their logic, fail in this. They want the object to be only one thing, but the object itself seems to resist that, just as it resists the lines in the museum catalogue. A bird calls from somewhere near the edge of the field, the sound sharp in the warm stillness. You close your eyes and see the candlestick again, but this time it is lit in a small stone room where someone murmurs words you cannot understand. You see the toy, rolling along a packed earth floor, a child's laughter chasing it. You see the weapon, held up to a tree line at dawn, the frost glittering on the grass. You see the farming tool, marking the moment when the first seeds touch the soil. And in each image, the dodecahedron is both the same and entirely different. When you open your eyes, the object is still beside you, unchanged. The official theories may fail to bind it, but in failing they have made something else clear. The dodecahedron is not a puzzle to be solved once, but a companion for wondering. It survives not because it demands an answer, but because it allows so many to live inside it. The air cools slightly as a cloud passes over the sun. You pick up the object again, hold it to your eye, and look at the field through one of its smaller holes. The grass becomes an abstract pattern of green and shadow, the horizon bending in ways it never does to the naked eye. For a moment you feel as though you're not just looking through the object, but seeing with it, as if the shape itself carries a way of viewing the world that is older than any theory could reach. You lower it slowly, letting the weight return to your palm. The official explanations have played their part. They have given you the frame, the boundaries of what might be possible, but now you feel the pull toward something else. The voices outside the formal walls of scholarship, the ones who speak not in catalogues, but in questions that cross into the impossible. The alternative theories are waiting, and with them, the next step in the journey. The breeze in the field has shifted again, bringing with it the faint smell of earth turned by distant ploughs. You cradle the Roman Dodecahedron in your hands, and for the first time since you found it, you let yourself drift into the wilder waters of thought, the space beyond the official voices, where speculation breathes more freely. These are the alternative theories, the ones that live in the margins of books and in late-night conversations, in quiet forums and between the lines of letters sent from one curious mind to another. The first, and perhaps most persistent of these, is the astronomical theory. The idea blooms in your mind like a slow dawn. The dodecahedron as a portable instrument for reading the heavens. You imagine standing on a cold frontier hill at dusk, the air sharp in your lungs. The bronze object is lifted to your eye, the holes aligned with a setting sun or rising moon. The different sizes of those apertures could match the apparent diameters of celestial bodies at various times of year. By sighting through two holes, perhaps you could measure their angular size and from that determine the date or even the season. It is a seductive image, a device that could tell time not in hours but in the deep ancient language of the sky. If you could know the exact moment of equinox or solstice, you could predict the turning of the agricultural year, the lengthening of days, the arrival of harvest. You could prepare for festivals that bound communities together in the cold months. And perhaps, if your people look to the heavens for omens, you could read the will of the gods themselves. But the astronomical theory is not the only one with gravity. Another suggestion drifts in, whispered from the edges of anthropology. Perhaps the dodecahedron was not a tool for measuring the sky at all, but a sacred object for guiding ritual. The 12 faces could represent the months, the 20 vertices the phases of the moon over the course of a year. The hollow space within could be a chamber for holding something, not coins or grain, but a small relic, a piece of bone, a token meant only for the initiated to see. You picture a dim interior space, the air scented with smoke and resin. The object is placed on an altar, its holes casting patterns of light and shadow on the wall. People stand in a circle murmuring words older than their own language, while the dodecahedron rests at the center like a small silent sun. It does not need to do anything in this scene, it only needs to be. Its presence is the act, its form, the prayer. And then another image pushes through, stranger still. This one comes from the modern fascination with hidden technologies. Some believe the dodecahedron was a kind of rangefinder for ancient archers or engineers. Yes, but others take the idea further. They say it was a part of something larger, a mechanism now lost to time. In their telling, it could have been a fitting for an instrument we no longer have, a piece of an orrery, a socket for a navigational tool, even a component in a device to project images of the heavens onto a surface. You turn the object in your hands, the knobs catching the sunlight, and you admit to yourself that it is easy to imagine it as a fragment of some intricate machine, especially when you recall how perfectly it balances, how exact the holes are in their placement. In that vision, the dodecahedron is not the whole story, but a survivor of something much greater, like a gear washed up on shore long after the ship has sunk. The theories grow bolder the deeper you go. Some speak of it as a communicator, a way to signal across distances, perhaps with light shining through the holes in patterns that could be read by others far away. Others imagine it as a teaching tool, not for practical measurement, but for passing on mathematical principles, the geometry itself serving as a physical lesson in symmetry, proportion, and the mysteries of the Platonic solids. And then, there are those who step entirely beyond the boundaries of the known past. They wonder aloud if the Dodecahedron predates Rome entirely, a relic from an older civilization, one so far back in time that its very memory was erased. In their eyes, the Romans did not create it. They found it, adopted it, and perhaps even copied it without understanding its original function. In this vision, the object is a fossil of knowledge from a time before recorded history, a time when the sky was red with more precision than our telescopes can now achieve, or when the Earth was mapped in ways that have since been lost. You let these images wash over you, each one rearranging the space around you in the field. The grass becomes a shoreline where bronze relics wash up from older tides. The sky becomes a great dial, and the dodecahedron the key for reading it. The earth beneath you becomes a woven fabric of stories, some still bright, some worn to threads, each one touching the shape in your hands. The beauty of these alternative theories is not that any of them are certain, none are, but that they expand the field of possibility. They keep the object alive in the imagination, moving it from the fixed glass cases of museums into the living world of use, belief, and wonder. And in doing so, they remind you that the absence of proof does not mean the absence of meaning. You lie back in the grass, the bronze resting on your chest, warm from your hands. The wind moves overhead, combing through the higher branches of unseen trees. You think of all the people who have looked at this shape and allowed themselves to imagine beyond the neat borders of official explanation. A medieval monk in a library, turning it over in lamplight. Victorian antiquarian sketching it into a leather-bound journal. A modern archaeologist holding it up to the sun on a dig site and feeling, for a brief moment, something like reverence. Theories may come and go, but the object remains. In a way, it is like the stars. Each generation gives them new names, new stories, but the light is the same. And maybe that is why these alternative voices matter, not because they will ever settle the question, but because they will keep the question alive. You close your eyes and let the dodecahedron rest beside you in the grass again. The field is quiet, but your mind still hums with the images. The astronomer on the hill, the priest at the altar, the engineer fitting it into a greater machine, the ancient wanderer carrying it from a place that has no name. None of these can be proven, and yet each, in its own way, feels possible. The sun warms your eyelids, and the thought comes unbidden. Perhaps the truest function of the Roman dodecahedron is to be a vessel for possibility itself, to give the imagination a shape to hold, a bridge between the tangible and the unknown. In this way, it does not matter if it is for farming or for the stars, for ritual or for war. Its purpose is here, in your hands, in the act of wandering. The breeze slows. The grass stands still for a moment, as if the world itself is listening. You breathe deeply, the air tasting faintly of distant rain, and you know that the next part of the story will not come from theories at all, but from something older, the memory of the people who lived alongside it, not in books, but in stories passed mouth to ear. Folklore waits beyond the horizon, carrying echoes that even history could not erase. The day has softened. The brightness that once lay sharp across the field has melted into a gentler light, the kind that seems to carry a touch of gold in every shadow. You sit cross-legged in the grass, the Roman Dodecahedron resting before you, and feel the shift. The air is still, yet not empty. It holds the faint murmur of something older than written words. It is not the sound of the object itself, but of the stories that cling to it, the way the scent of wood smoke lingers in a room long after the fire has gone out. These are not the tidy accounts of historians or the measured guesses of scholars. They belong to the realm of folklore, the memory of a people told in fragments and symbols, shaped by retelling, softened by time. Folklore does not care about precise dates or verifiable evidence. It keeps what is important to the heart, not necessarily to the archive. And in these stories, the dodecahedron takes on a life beyond any museum label. In the hills of ancient Gaul, the old people told of the seeing stones, bronze shapes with windows through which one could glimpse the realm of the gods. The stories said that to look through the right opening at the right time was to see not just the physical world, but the patterns beneath it, the weaving of fate, the steps of unseen beings, the threads that tied one life to another. Those who were granted this sight were not to speak of what they saw. It was a private knowing, something to be carried quietly. Far to the west, in what is now Wales, there were whispers of the stars you can hold. In these tales, the object was not left in the open. It was buried in the soil to keep away the shadow winds, strange forces that could sweep through a valley and leave crops withered overnight. A dodecahedron, the story said, was planted like a seed of protection. When the wind passed over the land, it would find the shape in the ground, and the holes would break it apart, scattering it harmlessly like water through a sieve. In the forests along the Rhine, another legend took root. There they spoke of the traveller's compass. It was not a compass as we know it. It did not point north, but home. The story went that if a wanderer held the object and closed one eye, looking through its openings while speaking their family's name, the correct path would become clear. Sometimes this guidance was said to appear as a light on the horizon, sometimes as a sudden certainty in the traveller's chest. The danger, the elders warned, was that the object might guide you not to your home in the living world, but to your home in the next. You turn the dodecahedron in your hands as you think of these stories. None of them agree. None explain the object in the same way, and yet beneath their differences there is something shared, a belief that the shape holds a relationship between the seen and the unseen, that its face is not just metal but doors. Whether those doors open to gods, to protection, or to the way home, the idea is the same. The object is a link between worlds. The light in the field shifts again, as if leaning in to listen. You let your eyes soften, the bronze edges blurring slightly. It's easy to imagine a time when such a thing would be both precious and dangerous. Precious for the guidance it offered, dangerous because such power could be misused. Folklore often hides warnings in its beauty. A tale told by the hearth might make a child's eyes widen with wonder, but the space between the words is where the caution lives. In the mountains of what is now Switzerland, some spoke of the sun catcher. On the day when the year was halfway to its close, the dodecahedron was set on a stone wall at dawn. As the sun rose, its light would pass through a particular hole and fall upon a carved mark nearby. If the light struck true, the coming winter would be kind. If it missed, the people knew to store more grain, to prepare for hardship. The elders never explained how they knew which hole to use. They said only that the knowledge was passed in whispers from one generation to the next, and that was never written down. A thread begins to weave between these stories as you listen in your mind. The dodecahedron is never described as a weapon. It is rarely even called a tool. It is a keeper of something. Sight, protection, direction, warning. Always something that crosses the line between the physical and the invisible. And though the details change with the land and the tongue, the feeling remains constant. It is not an object for everyone. It is for those who know how to look at it the right way. You wonder how much of this memory has been lost. Perhaps the Romans themselves heard these stories and either dismissed them as superstition or adopted the object into their own quiet uses. Perhaps the people of the provinces kept it alive as a local secret, even as the empire's banners flew over their hills and rivers. Folklore is stubborn like that. It slips under the door when history tries to close it. The breeze stirs the grass around you, and you imagine a group gathered in the evening on one of these same fields long ago. The air is cool, the stars bright overhead. An elder holds the bronze object in their hands, turning it so that the starlight glimmers along its edges. The younger ones lean closer, waiting for the story to begin. Perhaps it is the tale of the seeing stones, perhaps the sun catcher, perhaps one you have not yet heard. When the story ends, the object is passed to a chosen hand, the choice made without words. The rest of the group pretends not to notice, but they do. They always do. You glance down at the dodecahedron in your lap, feeling its weight shift slightly as you move it. You know the stories may be only fragments of a larger truth, or perhaps not truth at all, but the shapes of longing and fear made into words. But you also know that sometimes the heart of a thing is not in its factual history, but in the way it is remembered. The sun is dipping lower now, painting the edges of the grass with light. The day feels as though it is leaning toward evening. Folklore lingers in the air, its voices quiet but steady. You wonder if the people who once told these stories would be pleased to know the object is still being held, still being wondered about. Or perhaps they would be amused, watching from whatever place their spirits now reside, seeing how far from their original meaning the guesses have wandered. You rest your hand lightly over the bronze and close your eyes for a moment. The seeing stones, the stars you can hold, the traveller's compass, the sun catcher. 4 names for one shape, 4 reflections of a mystery that refuses to be pinned down. You let the words settle in your mind, and they fit together like pieces of a mosaic, leaving gaps between them where the unknown can breathe. When you open your eyes again, the light has shifted further. The dodecahedron's holes now hold small circles of shadow, the sun too low to pass through them directly. You feel as though you've been listening to something speak in a language you can almost understand, and that in the next part of the story you may begin to hear why such voices would ever be silenced. Somewhere, beyond the edge of this field, the path to that answer is waiting, quiet but insistent. The sun is low enough now that its warmth has begun to fade from the grass. You keep the Roman dodecahedron close, turning it slowly in your hands as the light slides across its bronze faces. The folklore still lingers in your mind, the seeing stones, the traveller's compass, the sun catcher. But now you feel the need to shift from stories to something more tangible. Not the purpose, not yet, but the clues that the object itself is willing to give. its material, its form, its craftsmanship. Bronze. The word feels heavy, steady. This is no clay trinket to crumble in the rain, no fragile glass to shatter in careless hands. Bronze is an alloy of intention, copper and tin brought together by fire, their bond stronger than either alone. The dodecahedron you hold has lasted centuries not by accident, but because it was made to last. You run your thumb along one of its edges. It is not sharp. Time has softened it, yet the precision of its lines remains. Whoever cast this knew what they were doing. You imagine the process. The mould, carved with care to form each face and each hole with exact dimensions. The molten bronze poured slowly so that no air pockets could form, cooling into a shape that would outlive its maker by 1,000 years. The knobs at each vertex are not crude lumps, but perfect spheres, each one aligned as though they mark something, a sequence perhaps, or a code. You tilt it, letting the light catch inside one of the holes. The walls of the aperture are clean, even now. No signs of chisel marks, no rough edges. You think of the tools it would take to make such a thing in the 2nd or 3rd century, the patience required to align each circle just so. This is not a thing made quickly or cheaply. It was meant for hands that valued both accuracy and beauty. And yet, there is no ornamentation, no carved figures, no etched inscriptions, no decorative flourishes. The object's beauty lies entirely in its form, in the way each face meets its neighbour, in the balance of its weight. That simplicity feels deliberate, as if the maker wanted nothing to distract from the geometry itself. You wonder if this lack of decoration was a kind of language too, a sign that the shape was the message, that the form itself was the function. Your mind drifts to the possibility of measurement. Could the varying sizes of the holes have been calibrated for specific purposes? You lift the dodecahedron and look through one of the larger openings, aligning it with a point on the horizon. Then you switch to a smaller one. The change in perspective is striking. The field contracts, the far trees shift position. It's easy to imagine this being used to calculate distances or angles. And yet, without a reference to pair it with, you are left only with the sensation of potential. The knobs intrigue you more than the holes. 20 in total, each the same size, each placed where 3 faces meet. You press one lightly with your thumb. Could they have been used for holding the object in place, perhaps tied or fixed to another structure? Or were they there to mark positions, like the raised points on a gaming die? The symmetry is pleasing, but it feels too exact to be purely aesthetic. The bronze itself tells a story. It is not corroded beyond recognition. There's only a thin patina, a greenish layer that speaks of age and exposure. This particular piece must have spent part of its life buried in soil rich in minerals, but not so acidic as to eat away at it entirely. You wonder if, in its earliest days, it gleamed bright gold in the sunlight, freshly polished by its maker's hands. That shine would have been impossible to ignore, visible from a distance, a beacon to draw the eye. You let the object rest in your lap and close your eyes, trying to imagine it in motion, not just held, but used. Perhaps it was turned in the hands like this, face after face meeting the light, each alignment telling something to someone who knew the pattern. Perhaps it was suspended by a cord through its hollow center, free to spin until it aligned with the sun or a star. The mind circles possibilities like a hawk tracing thermals, each one carrying you higher, but never landing. You open your eyes and run your fingers along the bevels again. The way they catch light makes you think of the word luminous. Even in shadow, the edges seem to glow faintly, as though the shape holds some of the day's brightness inside itself. It is not magic. Bronze does that. But the effect is a stuff to feel like it could be magic to someone who had never seen such a thing before. The craftsmanship forces another thought into your mind. Whoever made this was not working in isolation. To cast such a piece required access to skilled metalworkers, to the tools and materials of a well-supplied workshop. It also required knowledge, not just of geometry, but of how to translate that geometry into a physical object that would hold its form under the strain of heat and cooling. This was not made in a hurry at the edge of a battlefield. It was made in a place where time and resources were available. Which leads you to wonder, if such care went into each one, why do no two match exactly? The dimensions vary from piece to piece. The hole sizes differ. The pattern is consistent but not identical. It suggests a tradition without strict standardization, as though each dodecahedron was made to suit the needs or knowledge of the one who would use it. That could explain why their function has been so hard to pin down. If each served a slightly different purpose, then looking for a single, universal answer may be futile. You lean back on your elbows and watch the last of the sunlight stretch across the field. The dodecahedron rests beside you now, and in this light its colour deepens, taking on a warmth that feels alive. You think of it as a witness to the hands that shaped it, the eyes that peered through it, the places it travelled. Every scratch, every faint change in its surface is a word in a language you don't yet know how to read. The material, the symmetry, the knobs, the holes, these are the clues it gives willingly, but each clue is slippery, leading you toward an answer only to dissolve before you can grasp it. You realize that the physical evidence, for all its precision, is no less mysterious than the folklore or the theories. It is simply the same mystery spoken in a different tongue. The air cools further as the sun dips below the horizon. You gather the dodecahedron into your hands again, holding it as one might hold a sleeping bird, not to restrain, but to keep close. In the growing dimness, the holes become darker than the rest of the metal, like small windows into another night. You know the next part of this journey will take you upward, toward those very lights in the sky, to the theory that has pulled at your mind since you first looked through one of these openings. The alignment of this object with the movements of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Somewhere above, the first stars are already awake, and you can feel the pull of the next step, not just to hold the object in your hands, but to hold it to the heavens and see what it might choose to reveal. The first stars blink into being above you, faint at first, then clearer as the sky deepens into indigo. You hold the Roman dodecahedron in your hands, its bronze cooling in the evening air, and you know instinctively that this is its hour. Whatever else it might have been, whatever stories or uses it has carried, there is something in its form that seems to belong to the night sky. You can feel it in the way the edges catch the last of the light, in the way the holes seem to invite you to look through them rather than at them. The astronomical theory has been with you since you first lifted it to your eye. Now, with the darkness gathering and the stars beginning their slow drift overhead, the idea feels less like a guess and more like a call. You imagine ancient hands holding this same shape under a sky not so different from this one, turning it until a star slid neatly into the circle of an aperture. Perhaps they were measuring something. Perhaps they were marking a moment in the year. Perhaps both. You lie back in the grass, resting the object on your chest. From here, the constellations form themselves gradually. First a scatter of points, then familiar shapes emerging from the scatter. You think of how the ancients read these lights not only as a map for navigation, but as a clock for the turning of seasons, to know when the days would lengthen, when the rains would come, when to plant and when to harvest. All of this could be written in the stars if only you knew how to read them. You lift the Dodecahedron again, aligning one of its larger holes with a bright point in the eastern sky. The rest of the world falls away, framed by that perfect circle of bronze. You shift slightly until another hole lines up with the second star. In that moment you understand how such an object could become a personal observatory, a small portable horizon through which to measure the heavens. The varying hole sizes suddenly make sense in this context. Each pair could form a fixed angle, allowing you to sight distant points and determine their apparent distance from one another. With the right knowledge, that information could tell you where you were in the year, perhaps even where you stood upon the earth. A skilled observer might track the rising point of a certain star over time, noting its slow change as the seasons turned. The thought sends a shiver through you. This would not be a casual task. It would require patience, skill, and perhaps a tradition of training passed from one generation to the next. You think of the druids and priests of earlier ages, the astronomers of Babylon and Greece, and you realize that such knowledge was as much a form of power as any weapon. To read the sky was to read the will of the world itself. The moon is rising now, pale and deliberate. You align the dodecahedron with it, noting how its glow fills the opening of one hole but not another. If the object could track the apparent size of the moon at different times, it might also track its distance from Earth, and by extension, the tides it pulled across the seas. For a people dependent on coastal trade or fishing, such knowledge could mean survival. You shift the object again, watching the moon drift from one aperture to the next. The rhythm is hypnotic. Find, lose, like a quiet conversation between metal and sky. It's not difficult to imagine that in the hands of the right observer, this sequence could be read like a calendar, the holes each marking a specific phase or position. And then there is the sun. You imagine standing with this object at dawn on the day of the spring equinox, watching the first light pour through a certain pair of holes, striking the ground or a marked stone beyond. 6 months later, on the autumn equinox, the same alignment might occur in reverse. Between those points, the sun's path would rise higher or lower in the sky, and each change could be tracked through the apertures. You close your eyes and see it. A figure standing on a frost-touched field in March, the breath visible in the morning air, the dodecahedron raised to catch the first gold edge of sun. The light passes through it and lands exactly where it should, and with that confirmation the figure knows the season has turned. Planting may begin, festivals may be prepared. The invisible rhythm of the year has been brought into view. The object in your hands is silent, but the silence feels like permission, as if it is saying, yes, you may imagine this. You may picture the sky as it was read by those who came before. You think again of the knobbed vertices. If the object were mounted in a certain way, perhaps fixed into a wooden frame or suspended by cords, those knobs could serve as anchor points, allowing it to be rotated precisely. With the right positioning, the holes could line up with specific stars at specific times, creating a template of the night sky as it shifted across months. The more you think about it, the more the dodecahedron begins to feel like a bridge between the human scale and the cosmic. It is small enough to fit in your hands, yet capable of framing distances measured in light years. To someone untrained, it might look like a trinket. To someone initiated, it could be a key, not to open a door, but to open the sky. The stars are fully awake now, scattered thick across the darkness. You align the dodecahedron with Orion, the hunter's belt falling neatly into one aperture, while Betelgeuse glows faintly in another. The satisfaction of this alignment is immediate and strange, as though you have completed a task you did not know you were attempting. You wonder if those who once used this object felt the same, that moment when pattern emerges from the scatter, when the sky becomes a map you can actually read. You lower the object to your lap again, feeling the weight of centuries in it. If the astronomical theory is correct, even partially, then every dodecahedron was not just an artifact but an instrument. And like all instruments, its value lay not only in the object itself, but in the knowledge of how to use it. Without that knowledge, the bronze is silent. With it, the bronze could speak in the language of light and shadow, distance and time. You let the night wrap around you, the air cooling against your skin. Somewhere in that darkness, you imagine others holding the same shape, their faces lit by starlight, their eyes scanning the horizon for the next sign. Perhaps they stood on hills, in temple courtyards, or on the decks of ships anchored just beyond the shore. The method may have varied, but the act, lifting the object, aligning it with the heavens, was the same. The dodecahedron rests in your hands once more, and you know that even if no one can prove this theory, the image of it in use is enough to make it real in a way that matters. This sky has always been our first clock, our first map. To hold a piece of metal shaped for that purpose is to hold a fragment of the oldest human desire, to know where we are in the great turning of the world. You close your eyes, the cool night air brushing your face. Tomorrow, perhaps, you will think of other possibilities, but tonight the sky feels close, and the bronze feels like a tool meant to bring it closer still. And in that closeness, there is a quiet that goes deeper than the field, deeper than the dark, a quiet that feels like the very turning of the earth beneath you. The stars remain scattered above you like quiet embers, but your gaze drifts now from the sky back to the weight in your hands. The Roman dodecahedron lies cool and still, its edges dim in the starlight. You think of the astronomical theory, the neat logic of measurements and alignments, the elegance of a portable sky calendar. Yet as you sit there in the grass, another thought steals into your mind, a shadow slipping between the constellations. What if the reason we cannot be certain about its use is not because the knowledge faded slowly over time, but because something tore it away all at once? The idea is unsettling in its simplicity. We imagine the past as a slow erosion, traditions wearing down like stone under centuries of wind. But there are moments in history when the break comes suddenly, when the chain of memory is not frayed but snapped. You let the possibility take shape. Somewhere, perhaps near the edges of the empire where these bronze shapes were found, there may have been a catastrophe. Not the kind that leaves only ashes and ruins, but the kind that silences, that takes the keepers of a knowledge and scatters them so widely they cannot find one another again. It could have been a war, a wave of violence that swept through the frontier towns. It could have been a sickness, a winter that did not end. a famine that emptied the villages. You imagine one such village now. It is late autumn. The people gather at a stone circle on a hill, the Dodecahedron placed at its centre. They are marking the season's turn, measuring the low arc of the sun, deciding when to store the last of the grain. The air smells of wood smoke and damp earth. Children watch from the edge, their eyes wide as the light falls exactly where the elder says it should. And then, before the next turning, something comes. It could be soldiers from a far-off province, bringing orders no one understands. It could be raiders, their weapons flashing in the cold dawn. It could be a sickness that moves invisibly through the air. Whatever it is, the next gathering does not happen. The elder does not return to the stone circle. The children grow older, but no one shows them how to align the bronze with the sun. The object is buried for safekeeping, hidden under a hearthstone or in the roots of an oak, and then it is forgotten. You run your fingers over the knobs, each one smooth, each one the meeting point of three faces. You wonder if the maker knew how fragile knowledge can be, how a single season can be enough to erase a language, a ritual, a way of reading the world. We think of history as a straight line, but here, holding this object, you feel the breaks in that line like fractures in old bone. Perhaps the catastrophe was larger still, an empire stretched too thin, its borders strained by pressures from outside and inside alike. Legions recalled from distant provinces, leaving behind the communities that had relied on their trade and their relative stability. The slow withdrawal of Rome from these northern lands would have left gaps, and in those gaps, old customs might have withered without support, or been deliberately destroyed to make way for new ones. You think of how many times this must have happened, not only here but across the world. Knowledge vanishing in a single generation because the people who carried it were lost. A flood in 1 century can erase 1,000 years of memory. A fire in a single library can swallow the work of countless lives. And a device like the Dodecahedron, if it depended on a living tradition to explain it, could fall silent the moment that tradition broke. The breeze moves gently through the grass, and for a moment it sounds like a whisper you almost recognize. You imagine the survivors of such a break. Perhaps they carried the object with them into exile, not because they still knew its use, but because it was beautiful, because it felt important. It might have passed through many hands after that, each one valuing it for reasons far removed from its original purpose. Over time, it became simply old, a relic of the time before, until even that description no longer held meaning. You remember how, in the official records, there is no single moment when the use of the dodecahedron disappears. There is only the silence of absence. That silence might not mean it faded quietly. It might mean the moment of loss was hidden inside some larger upheaval, like a single voice swallowed by the roar of a storm. Your thoughts drift further back, before Rome, before the roads and the forts, to a time when the people of these lands lived by the turning of the seasons alone. Perhaps the knowledge was theirs first, long before the empire adopted the shape. If so, the loss may have begun even earlier, as their way of life was absorbed into Roman order. In that case, the catastrophe was not a single blow, but a slow replacement, their rituals overshadowed by new ones, their tools taken as curiosities, their meanings set aside. The stars above you are steady, indifferent to these thoughts. They have seen such endings before. You can almost feel them looking down on you as they must have looked on those who once held the same bronze shape. wondering if they too felt the closeness of loss before it arrived. You hold the dodecahedron a little tighter, as if to keep it from slipping into that same silence again. It feels like more than metal now. It feels like a survivor, not just of centuries buried in the soil, but of all the unseen endings that nearly erased it from the human story. The very fact that you are holding it now means that at least one of those endings failed. Something kept it here, waiting. And perhaps that is its quiet triumph. Knowledge may have been broken, scattered, or burned away, but the shape endured. The geometry outlasted the words that once described it. The bronze outlasted the hands that once turned it toward the sky. The thought is strangely comforting. It means that even if everything else falls away, something remains. A trace, a form, a reminder that not all is lost. You wonder how many other objects might be out there, carrying the ghost of a purpose no one remembers, waiting for someone to notice. The wind settles. The field is calm again, the night deepening. You rest the dodecahedron beside you on the grass and lean back, letting the stars fill your vision. Somewhere in the patterns above, you think, is the same sky that once shone down on the people who made and used this object. Whatever took their knowledge away, it could not take that. The sky is still here, the object is still here, and so, in a way, they are too. When you close your eyes, the images return, the hilltop gathering, the elder turning the bronze to catch the sun, the moment just before the catastrophe. You feel it pause there, like a breath held too long, and then dissolve. The rest is silence, but in that silence the shape remains, and in your hands it feels like a promise. What is lost can sometimes be found again. The night is still around you, but the air feels heavier now, as though the weight of what you've been imagining has settled into the field itself. You rest the Roman dodecahedron on your knees and let your fingers circle over its knobs one by one, tracing a path that feels almost like counting. In the quiet, another possibility stirs, one that does not speak of forgotten knowledge by accident, but by design, the suppression theory. It is an uncomfortable thought, but it has followed this object through centuries of speculation, that someone, somewhere, decided it was better for its meaning to vanish, not merely forgotten, not merely displaced by new inventions or customs, but erased. That the absence in the record might not be an accident of history, but the result of a deliberate silence. You think of the empire that once stretched over these lands, Rome with its marble halls and crowded markets, its military might and rigid hierarchies, an empire that valued control above all else. Such a place might not welcome tools or traditions that belong to no central authority, especially if those tools could offer knowledge or power to the wrong hands. The dodecahedron, if it was used to read the heavens, to track time or the seasons, or to guide people in ways outside the official calendar, could have represented a rival order, a local system of knowing that didn't need imperial approval. Rome prided itself on bringing unity to its provinces, which meant imposing its own ways of measuring, recording, and ruling. Anything that ran counter to that unity could be seen as dangerous. It is not hard to imagine an official decree spoken in Latin and carried by messengers to far-flung outposts. Such objects are to be surrendered, their use discontinued. The elders who knew their meaning might have been pressured to stop teaching it. The objects themselves might have been melted down, recast into coins or weapons, leaving only a few hidden examples to survive. The thought makes you hold your dodecahedron tighter, as though it could be taken from you even now. The bronze is cool in your hands but steady, the kind of steady that resists being erased entirely, and yet the suppression need not have been so direct. Sometimes the most effective way to bury something is to ridicule it. You can almost hear the voice of a Roman administrator mocking the object in front of a crowd, calling it a trinket for children or a useless ornament. Over time, such dismissal could strip it of its dignity, turn it into a curiosity rather than a respected tool. Once people stop taking something seriously, it becomes easier to forget. Or perhaps the suppression came later, not in Rome's time, but in ours. You think of the way academic institutions sometimes guard the boundaries of what they consider serious study. An archaeologist who spends too much time chasing unusual ideas risks their reputation. Funding flows toward the safe, the proven, the predictable. Out-of-place artifacts are often labelled unexplained and then quietly shelved, as if further inquiry might open doors better left closed. It is easy to imagine the Dodecahedron being one of those artifacts, too strange to fit neatly into known categories, too many unprovable theories clinging to it. Better, perhaps, for curators to keep it under glass with a neutral label, allowing the public to see it without encouraging dangerous curiosity. Your thoughts spiral further. What if the suppression is not about hiding a tool, but about hiding what it reveals? If the dodecahedron truly connects to the heavens, if it encodes a way of reading the stars, of measuring time with uncanny precision, then perhaps it once pointed to truths that challenged official narratives. A sky that tells a different story than the one inscribed in the imperial calendars. A timeline that doesn't align with the sanctioned history. Such things could be quietly devastating to those who rely on history as a pillar of their authority. You glance down at the object in your lap. It is silent as always, but you cannot shake the feeling that it has been through more than just the wear of centuries. The faint scratches on its surface, the patina that dulls its edges, they are marks of survival. If suppression did happen, then this piece escaped it. It survived by chance, or by the careful hands of someone who chose to hide rather than destroy it. In your mind, you see that person. Perhaps they are a Roman soldier posted in the north, who has seen the device used by local people and grown to respect its quiet authority. When the order comes to collect and melt them down, he slips one into a sack of personal belongings. Years later, retired and living far from the frontiers, he buries it in a field near his home, where it will lie until a farmer's spade finds it centuries later. Or perhaps it is a village elder warned by a friend in the town that men will soon arrive to seize the old tools. She takes the dodecahedron into the forest under cover of darkness, burying it beneath the roots of an oak and marking the place only in her memory. She never returns for it. The tree grows, the land changes hands, but deep beneath the bronze waits. The suppression theory makes you think differently about the silence in the records. It no longer feels like a void left by chance, but a quiet that was pressed into place. And yet suppression rarely erases everything. Fragments always remain, a half-remembered story, a rumour, an object hidden so well it outlasts its hunters. The breeze stirs the grass, and you lean back, looking up at the stars again. If the dodecahedron is one of those fragments, then holding it is not just holding a mystery. It is holding a survivor of a struggle you will never fully see. And perhaps that is why it resists explanation, because it was meant to resist. You turn it in your hands once more, feeling its geometry settle and resettle in your grip. If there was suppression, then every surviving example is a kind of defiance, a quiet refusal to vanish entirely. The thought fills you with a strange gratitude toward the unknown people who kept it safe. They did not live to see you here, but their care crossed centuries to meet you, and now, it seems, the object has a new keeper, for a time at least. You, whatever its purpose, whatever was taken from it, it has found its way back into human hands. And with that, the question lingers. If something once powerful enough to be silenced is now awake in the world again, what will it choose to reveal? You set it gently on the ground beside you and watch the starlight pool in its holes. If it holds any answer, it is not giving it yet. Perhaps it never will. But in the act of wondering, you can feel the silence around it shifting, just slightly, as though the centuries are not as unbroken as they seemed. The stars have deepened into the kind of night where the horizon seems to vanish entirely, where sky and earth merge into a single expanse of shadow. You keep the Roman Dodecahedron in your hands, turning it slowly, letting its weight anchor you in this quiet. The theories, the histories, the possibilities, they all feel like voices that have spoken and then stepped back, leaving you alone with the object itself. And in this moment it feels right to stop thinking of it as a puzzle to be solved and start feeling it as a presence to be experienced. You hold it up so that one of its faces catches the faint starlight. The bronze is dark now, its edges dim, yet there is a soft gleam that seems to travel along the bevels as you tilt it. You notice how each hole becomes a deep well of shadow, a circle that feels less like an absence and more like a window into something unseen. It is as if the object is built from both matter and emptiness in equal measure, and the emptiness is just as deliberate as the metal. You rest it back in your lap, feeling the cool curve of one of its knobs against your palm. You let your mind drift. If this shape truly is as old as the scholars say, crafted in the 2nd or 3rd century, then it has existed through so many nights like this. Nights when the world was lit only by fire and the sky was so sharp with stars that you could see the pale band of the Milky Way stretch from one horizon to the other. Nights when no map of the heavens was drawn on paper, but instead lived in the memory of those who studied them. You imagine those hands again, ancient, calloused, strong lifting this same shape, aligning it to a point of light. Maybe the person was alone, listening to the soft rush of a river nearby. Maybe they stood among others in silence, each person watching the sky from behind the bronze lattice. The act would have been slow, unhurried, like the turning of a page in a book that could never be rushed. The geometry begins to take on a symbolic weight in your mind. 12 faces, the months of a year, or the signs of the zodiac. 20 vertices, the lunar stations, the steps of the moon as it moves through its cycle. The hollow center, the space between things, the still point around which the rest turns. You trace the edges with your fingertips, and the object seems to answer, not with words, but with the quiet confirmation of its balance, its symmetry, its refusal to be anything less than exact. The wind is softer now, almost gone, and the air feels suspended, as though time itself has slowed to match your stillness. You close your eyes and hold the dodecahedron against your chest. It is more than an artifact in this moment. It feels like a vessel, not for something physical, but for a way of seeing, a lens you can't look through with your eyes alone, but with some deeper part of your mind. Images come unbidden. A circle of people in robes of heavy wool, their faces lit by the slow glow of torches. The object placed in the centre, light catching in its holes and spilling onto the ground in patterns that shift as the torches flicker. A voice speaking, not loudly, but clearly naming things in a language you do not know, yet somehow understand. The words are not explanations, they are invitations. Each one opens a door, and behind each door is another image. A field at dawn, a river at flood, the first frost clinging to the edges of leaves. You open your eyes and the field around you feels different, as if the echoes of that vision are still here. You realize that this is what the object does. It holds attention. It draws the mind into patterns, into circles, into cycles, and when the mind follows, it begins to see connections where before there were only scattered points. Perhaps this was its true power, not to measure, not to calculate, but to focus, to remind those who held it that they were part of a rhythm that stretched from the ground beneath their feet to the farthest stars. In a world that could be chaotic and unpredictable, such a reminder might have been as valuable as any weapon or store of food. You tilt it again, and the starlight shifts, gliding along the metal until it catches in two opposite holes. Through one you see a bright, Point Vega, maybe, or Altair. Through the other, only darkness. You turn it slightly, and the darkness gives way to another star. The motion feels like tuning an instrument, adjusting until the right note hums into place. Your breath has slowed without you realizing it. The steady rise and fall matches the weight of the bronze in your hands, the shape of the night around you. You understand now why, in some of the old stories, the object was seen as a bridge between worlds. It does not matter whether that meant the realm of the gods or simply the space between the visible and the invisible. Holding it changes how you stand in the world. You think of all the people who might have felt this before you. Soldiers, farmers, traders, healers. Some might have known exactly what they were doing when they turned it toward the sky. Others might have held it only once, in passing, and felt something they could not name. In every case, the object would have left its mark, not in the form of a lesson or a number, but as a quiet shift in perspective. The field is utterly still now. You place the dodecahedron on the ground beside you and watch how it sits, perfectly balanced, as if even the uneven grass cannot disturb its symmetry. In the dim light, it almost disappears into the earth, as though it could sink back into the soil without leaving a trace. But it does leave a trace in you. You realize that you have been breathing with it, seeing with it, listening with it. It is not a thing that gives answers. It is a thing that changes the shape of the questions you ask. The wind returns, just barely, brushing against your cheek. You glance once more at the dodecahedron and feel that its stillness is not the stillness of stone, but the stillness of a held breath, something waiting to move again when the time is right. You reach out and lift it once more, and in that movement you sense that you have joined a long line of others who have done the same. Whatever it was in the past, tool, talisman, guide, it is now something else for you. It is a reminder that the world still has places where silence is not emptiness, but presence, where the unknown is not a void, but a space to stand in without fear. You keep it in your hands as you lean back to watch the stars, and for the first time tonight, you stop thinking entirely. The night stretches on, but your mind drifts far from the field. The Roman dodecahedron rests in your hands, and though it feels singular, you begin to sense it as part of something larger, not just a single object, but a pattern that reaches across centuries and continents. You've seen its faces in museums and in books, but now, in the stillness, you begin to remember the stories of other shapes like it, born in other lands, carved in other materials, each carrying a strange familiarity. Long before Rome, in the highlands of Scotland, there were stone spheres, carved with knobs, covered in geometric patterns, perfectly balanced in the palm. Archaeologists have found them buried deep in earth older than any Roman road, their purpose just as mysterious. They do not share the Dodecahedron's 12 faces, but they carry the same insistence on symmetry, the same deliberate shaping that speaks of intention without revealing it. In the deserts of Egypt, fragments of gold and ivory have been unearthed, small polyhedra whose edges are worn smooth by time. Some were found in tombs, some in ancient workshops, as if they had been made not only for the living, but for those making the journey beyond. In the Indus Valley, beads shaped like tiny polyhedra have been found alongside intricate weights and measures, their scale suggesting they were meant to be held close, inspected, turned in the light. The pattern repeats in the New World too. In the ruins of the Inca and earlier Andean civilizations, carved stone dodecahedra have been found, often in ceremonial contexts, their faces etched with symbols now faded beyond reading. Across the Pacific in Polynesian cultures, there are stories of sacred objects made in geometric forms, not metal, not stone, but carved wood, kept in temples, rarely touched by anyone outside the priestly class. Different materials, different cultures, but the same strange impulse to create these precise, many-faced forms, as if humanity itself carries some deep memory of their geometry. The knowledge may not have travelled in a straight line from one culture to another. Perhaps it rose independently in different places. The ice spirals appear in seashells and galaxies alike. Or perhaps a thought that tightens your chest. The knowledge came from a single source, far older than we remember, scattering like seeds across the world, each seed taking root in its own soil, its own tradition. You imagine such a source now, a civilization that predates our earliest histories, one that understood the language of shapes as clearly as we now understand numbers. In their world, geometry was not abstract. It was alive, woven into the fabric of ritual, navigation, the reading of sky and sea. They passed their knowledge through objects, each form carrying a piece of the whole. The dodecahedron was one of those forms. When their civilization fell to flood, fire, or some slow catastrophe, their shapes remained, carried by survivors to new lands where the meaning slowly changed, adapted, or was lost entirely. The idea is impossible to prove, yet as you turn the bronze in your hands, the weight feels less like the weight of metal and more like the weight of inheritance. You're not the first to hold it. You will not be the last. And somewhere there are others, in stone, in gold, in wood, waiting in the dark. The repetition in history is not just in the shapes themselves, but in the way they have been treated. In every case, the record is incomplete. The people who made them left little or no written explanation. The meaning survives in fragments of story, in whispers of ritual, in the careful way the objects were buried or placed in sacred spaces. And every time they are found, the same questions rise. What was this for? Who made it? Why here? Why now? You imagine a great unseen network spanning continents and ages, linking each of these objects together. The Scottish stone sphere lies in the earth as the Egyptian gold polyhedron rests in a tomb. The Incan carved stone sleeps beneath the floor of a temple, while the Roman bronze dodecahedron waits in a frontier field. None of them are aware of one another, yet they form a constellation of their own, points connected not by space, but by form and by the persistent silence that surrounds them. The wind brushes through the grass, and you think about how these shapes are like messages sent forward through time. Not messages in words, but in structure. The number of faces, the balance of weight, the precision of symmetry, all of it is information, if only you knew how to read it. Perhaps each culture that received one of these forms was able to interpret part of the message, but never the whole. Perhaps the complete understanding exists only when all of them are seen together, side by side, the way constellations are only visible when you connect the scattered stars. You wonder what would happen if all the surviving examples from around the world were brought into the same place. Would they share a hidden language? Would their proportions line up into a code? Would the missing pieces of one be mirrored in another? The thought leaves you restless, aware that somewhere in a museum drawer, another object like this might be lying in darkness, its story still unopened. The repetition also lives in the human reaction to them. In every age, in every place, these objects have drawn both reverence and dismissal. Some see them as sacred, others as meaningless curiosities. The debate always circles back to the same place, the threshold between the known and the unknown. It is as if the shapes themselves are guardians of that threshold, allowing each generation to approach but never quite cross. You tilt the dodecahedron toward the sky. Through one of its holes, you see a single star framed perfectly, steady against the darkness. You shift it, and another star takes its place. It is a simple act, yet it feels profound, as if you're repeating a gesture made by countless hands before yours. Maybe that is the deepest repetition of all, not just the creation of the object, but the act of using it, turning it, aligning it with something greater than yourself. The night is quiet except for your own breathing. You think of the others out there, the stone sphere lying forgotten in a Scottish field, the gold shape hidden in a tomb, the carved wooden form resting in a Polynesian temple. Different materials, different lands, the same silent invitation. Hold me, turn me, see what I see. You lower the bronze back into your lap. The repetition in history is not accidental. It is a reminder. Whatever the dodecahedron's original use, it is part of a conversation humanity has been having with itself for millennia, across oceans and ages. The words of that conversation have been lost, but the shapes remain, like bones of an ancient language waiting for someone to learn how to speak it again. For now, all you can do is listen, and in the listening you feel the echo, not just from this field, not just from Rome's time, but from places and centuries you will never see, all answering the same unspoken question. Do you remember me? The night air is still cool against your face when the thought comes to you. For all the centuries this object has endured, for all the questions it has stirred, it has never given a single clear answer. You glance down at the Roman dodecahedron in your lap, its edges dim now in the faint light, and you realize that this, the refusal to be solved, may be the one constant in its long history. 2 centuries of study, and still the museum labels say the same thing they said when the first one was found. Function unknown. It's almost strange when you think about it. We live in a world where knowledge accumulates faster than ever. where a single question can send someone to a library or a database and return an answer in seconds. Yet here is something that has been in human hands for nearly 2,000 years, and no one, not even the most patient researchers, can say for certain what it was for. The dodecahedron has slipped through the nets of certainty, as if designed to do so. You imagine the scholars who have bent over these shapes under museum lights. Some arrived with open minds, letting the object suggest its own story. Others came with a theory already in hand, looking only for evidence to prove it. The result has been a cycle as predictable as the seasons. A new paper is published. The theory gains a small following. Other experts point out its flaws, and the label in the display case remains unchanged. In the great storerooms of Europe's museums, more of these bronze shapes sit in drawers and on shelves, their surfaces dulled, their holes collecting dust. Some are brought out for exhibitions now and then, placed in glass cases under bright lights. Visitors pause in front of them for a moment, read the brief description, and move on. For most, they are just one curiosity among many, an odd object that refuses to explain itself. But every so often, someone lingers. You can imagine it. A student, maybe, or a traveller with a mind open to the strange. They lean closer, eyes tracing the edges, wondering why no one has figured it out yet. They imagine holding it, feeling the weight, turning it toward the light. They think about how this object has been touched by hands now long gone, how it has crossed the centuries without losing its shape. They might leave without an answer, but they take something else with them, the memory of a question that stayed alive. It strikes you that perhaps this is the true work of the dodecahedron in the modern world, not to explain, but to provoke. Its purpose now is not practical, but emotional, even philosophical. In a time when so much can be known, it is a rare reminder that mystery still exists, that some things resist the demand to be catalogued and defined. You turn it slowly in your hands. The field around you is silent except for the faint movement of grass. You think of the hundreds of miles between the places these shapes have been found, the Scottish hills, the French vineyards, the German forests, the Hungarian plains. Each discovery was a spark of curiosity, each one feeding the mystery. And yet, no matter how many are gathered together, no matter how carefully they are measured and compared, the answer remains out of reach. The stalemate has not been without its tensions. In academic circles, the dodecahedron is often treated with polite dismissal. An interesting curiosity, some say, but not worth too much speculation. Others grow frustrated with the lack of progress, declaring that without written records the truth will never be known. But outside those walls, among amateur historians, independent researchers, and the quietly fascinated, the object's power grows. It becomes not just a question, but a symbol of resilience, of the limits of certainty, of the way the past can keep its secrets no matter how hard we try to pry them open. You run your fingers along the bronze once more. It occurs to you that this object has lived through many stalemates before. Moments when it passed from one set of hands to another without revealing itself, when it survived the collapse of an empire, the shifting of borders, the rise and fall of languages. Perhaps this modern scholarly impasse is just another chapter in a long line of pauses, each one waiting for the next turn of attention. In the quiet, you let your thoughts stretch forward in time. 100 years from now, will people still be asking the same questions? Will the label still read "Function Unknown"? You think it might. And strangely, the idea doesn't feel disappointing. The persistence of the mystery is part of its beauty. If someone were to find an answer tomorrow, the object would change. It would become a tool or a relic of a specific kind. Its place in the imagination narrowed. But as long as it remains undefined, it can be anything. You set it down in the grass beside you. In the dim starlight, it looks almost like a natural thing, as if it grew there among the blades, a bronze flower that simply chose not to open. The sight makes you think of all the people who might have seen it in the earth before you did. The farmer in England who pulled the first one from his field, the labourers in France who uncovered one among the roots of a vineyard, the soldiers who might have stumbled across one buried near a crumbling wall. Each time it was lifted into the light, examined, and then passed on. Each time the chain of curiosity grew another link. The night deepens, and the field feels vast around you. You can almost sense the other dodecahedra resting in their own quiet places, in drawers, in display cases, still buried in the soil. They form an invisible constellation across the land, not connected by light like the stars above, but by shape and by the strange, enduring question they carry. You lean back, eyes on the sky. The stars are clear tonight, their patterns unchanged for thousands of years. Somewhere in those same skies, long ago, the people who made this object once looked up and saw what you see now. Perhaps they too wondered what would endure of their world, what would survive to be held by hands they could never imagine. Perhaps they knew that the object itself might outlast its explanation, that it could carry something more precious than instructions, the ability to make someone stop, to make them feel the vastness of time, the strangeness of existence, the presence of the unknown. The wind moves gently through the grass, and you let your breath slow to match its rhythm. The dodecahedron lies beside you, silent as ever, but you no longer feel the need to press it for answers. The stalemate is not a failure. It is the space in which the object lives. To define it completely might be to end the very thing that makes it so alive. You close your eyes, and for a moment you picture the museums of the future. The glass cases remain, the labels unchanged, the visitors still pausing to look. Somewhere among them, someone stops for longer than they meant to. They lean closer. They imagine holding it. They imagine the centuries. And the chain of wondering continues, unbroken. The sky has deepened to its darkest hour, that quiet, suspended moment before the first pale hint of dawn. You sit with the Roman dodecahedron resting in your lap, its edges just visible in the faint light from the stars. The night around you feels endless, and in that vastness you begin to think about the most fragile of all human things, memory. Not the kind stored in books or tablets, but the kind carried in voices, gestures, and rituals. The kind that fades not with centuries, but with the turning of a few short generations. You trace the edge of one face with your thumb, and the thought takes root. Perhaps the reason no one can agree on this object's purpose is because it belonged to a tradition that left no written trace at all. Its meaning might have been passed only from teacher to student, elder to child, through demonstrations, through the steady repetition of a skill until it became second nature. Without a living chain of people to pass it on, that meaning could vanish in a single lifetime. You imagine such a moment now. Somewhere on the northern frontier of the Roman Empire, a teacher and their apprentice stand at the crest of a hill. The dodecahedron is in the younger's hands. The teacher points to the sun's low arc in the winter sky. showing how the light falls through one aperture and lands on a stone marker. The apprentice nods, seeing the connection between object and sky. The lesson is simple, elegant, and alive. But then something happens. Perhaps the teacher falls ill before the next season, or war scatters the community. The apprentice keeps the object, but without the context it becomes only a strange piece of metal. By the time it passes to the next set of hands, it is already mute. It is humbling to think of how easily this could happen. Even now we lose small traditions every year, songs that are no longer sung, skills that are no longer taught, places whose names vanish from maps. Multiply that fragility by centuries, and it is no wonder that the Dodecahedron's language has gone silent. But there is another side to memory. Not the part that vanishes, but the part that lingers. Some memories embed themselves so deeply that they survive even after their exact details are lost. They change shape, becoming stories, symbols, superstitions. Perhaps the dodecahedron's true purpose is gone, but echoes of it might still live in the myths and folklore of the regions where it was found. You think of the stories you've heard, the tales of seeing stones that allow a person to view far-off lands, the charms said to call back the sun at the end of a long winter, the talismans that mark the passage of certain sacred days. None of these match the object exactly, but the rhythm feels familiar. They are all about connection between the person and the sky, between the present moment and a larger cycle. You imagine an old woman in a dimly lit cottage telling children a story about an object with many windows, each one showing a different world. She never says dodecahedron. She may not even know such a word, but the image she plants in their minds is of a shape that is more than it appears, a shape that lets you see beyond the ordinary. Over generations, the physical object might be forgotten, but the idea remains. The thought makes you wonder, if the true meaning of the dodecahedron could not be preserved in words, perhaps it has been preserved in feelings. The quiet focus of looking through it, the sense of balance when it rests in the hand, the awareness of a pattern larger than oneself. These feelings could survive in fragments, resurfacing in different times and places, carried by people who never knew their source. You look down at it again, and in the faint starlight, it feels almost like holding a piece of someone else's dream. The object is real, solid, unchanging, but the meaning it once carried is fluid. It has drifted from one mind to another, shifting each time, like a story told and retold around countless fires. The more you think about it, the more you realize that this is how memory works at its deepest level. It does not always preserve the exact words or instructions. Instead, it holds on to the shape of the experience, the feeling of the moment, the sense of significance. That significance might attach itself to new forms, a ritual, a song, a symbol carved into a stone, but somewhere, at its root, it may still point back to this same object. You imagine walking through the lands where other dodecahedra have been found. Perhaps in a remote village in France, someone still keeps a festival tied to the equinox, not knowing that long ago their ancestors might have measured the sun's angle with a device like the one in your hands. Perhaps in a valley in Germany, there is a carved stone with 12 small circles worn smooth, placed there to mark something no one remembers. These fragments of cultural memory are like footprints. The walker is gone, but the path remains. The stars above feel closer now, their light unbroken by clouds. You lift the dodecahedron and hold it so one bright star is framed in a hole. You don't know if you were using it as it was meant to be used. You don't know if anyone alive today could say for certain. But the act feels right, and that you think is its own kind of memory. An instinct passed down not in words, but in the body. The quiet stretches. The object sits steady in your hands, and you realize that you're now part of its memory too. Whatever else happens to it in the years ahead, it will carry this night with it. Your hands, your breath, your stillness beneath the dark. Perhaps that is how memory has always worked for it. Each person who has held it leaves a trace, not visible on the surface but woven into the story the object carries forward. You set it gently on the grass, and it seems to settle into the earth as if returning to an old resting place. In the hush, you think about all the other hands that have done the same, setting it down after use, perhaps with reverence, perhaps without knowing why. That act, repeated countless times over centuries, may be the only unbroken thread in its history. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the first light of morning will be coming soon, but for now, the night still holds you, the object, and the invisible threads of memory that bind you to people you will never meet. The dodecahedron's meaning may be gone, but its presence remains, and in that presence is a different kind of truth, one that does not depend on knowing. It is the truth that some things endure, not because they are explained, but because they are remembered, even imperfectly. And as long as they are remembered, they can still speak, not in words, but in the quiet language of form, weight, and touch. You lift it once more, and in the faint starlight it looks almost like it is listening. The first pale wash of dawn has begun to bleed into the horizon, a faint silver brushing away the deeper shadows. You can feel the shift in the air. The quiet that belongs to night is thinning, and with it comes the soft stirring of a new day. The Roman dodecahedron sits in your hands, cool and solid, its edges catching the earliest light. After hours in the dark, the bronze glows faintly, as if it has been holding the night inside itself and is now offering it back to the morning. You turn it slowly, watching how the rising sun slides across its faces. Light pools in one aperture, spills out another, and scatters into the grass at your feet. It feels as though the object has come alive in this moment, revealing a side of itself that the night could never show. The holes are no longer wells of shadow, but portals of gold, each one framing a piece of the waking world. It's strange, after all the theories, all the imagined histories, all the quiet hours of holding it, how you now feel less concerned with knowing its exact purpose. Somewhere along the way, the need for answers has softened. In its place is a feeling you can only call companionship. The dodecahedron has been with you through the stillness of the night, through the turning of your own thoughts, through the journey from questions into something quieter and more lasting. You think about all the others who have held it before you. Farmers, soldiers, travellers, scholars, each one living in their own time, with their own worries and hopes. The object has been present for all of them, constant and unchanged, even as the world around it shifted beyond recognition. It has crossed empires and borders, weathered centuries of silence, and still it remains here, balanced in your hands. In the soft light, you see it less as a riddle to be solved and more as a mirror, one that reflects not just the person holding it, but the long line of people before and after. It reminds you that the past is not something sealed away in books or ruins. It is alive in the objects we keep, in the stories we tell, in the shapes that somehow survive long enough to reach us. Theories will come and go. Perhaps one day a new discovery will explain the Dodecahedron beyond any doubt. A fragment of writing, an illustration on a forgotten wall, a complete set of instructions etched into bronze. But even then, even if its mystery is one day solved, it will still be more than its function, because the true gift it offers is not in its use, but in the way it invites you to stop, to look closely, to imagine. You rest it gently on the ground in front of you. The grass bends beneath it, and for a moment it looks as if it has always been here, waiting. You think of all the other fields, all the other places where such shapes might still lie hidden beneath the earth, in the roots of trees, in the soil of vineyards, in the shadow of old walls, each one a seed of curiosity, waiting for the right hands to uncover it. The light is growing stronger now. Birds have begun to stir in the hedges, their calls threading into the still air. You realize that you have been here all night without once feeling the need to hurry. The object has that effect. It slows the mind, shifts the sense of time. It reminds you that the world has always been bigger than our understanding of it, and always will be. You take a long, slow breath. The scent of earth, of damp grass, of morning itself fills your lungs. For a brief moment it feels as though you are standing on the threshold of every dawn that has ever been. The same slow brightening that has touched every generation, including those who once looked through this very shape. The dodecahedron will leave with you, but the night you've shared with it will stay here, folded into the land. You rise, brushing the dew from your hands, and lift the object one last time to the sky. The sun's edge crests the horizon, spilling gold into every opening, filling it with light until it is almost too bright to look at. You lower it slowly, holding it close. Whatever it once was, whatever it may still be, it is now part of your own story. You have joined the long, unbroken chain of those who have kept it close for a while, wondered about it, and then carried it forward. Somewhere in the future, someone else will do the same. And perhaps that is the most important thing of all. Not the answer, but the continuity. The shared act of wondering. The way an object can link lives across centuries, not through certainty, but through mystery. As you begin to walk back toward the edge of the field, the object warm now in your hands, you can't help but glance back at the place where you sat. The grass already hides the impression you left, but the moment remains. A quiet meeting between the present and the past. A night shared with something older than any living memory. You know that others will hear about this story, and perhaps they will feel what you felt. The stillness, the curiosity, the sense of connection. And if they do, they might be drawn into the same long conversation that has carried this object across time. If you're listening to these words now, take a moment to think about where you are, about the ground beneath you and the sky above. Think about the objects in your life that might outlast you, carrying a piece of your story forward. And if the mystery of the Roman dodecahedron has stayed with you tonight, let it linger. Let it remind you that there is still wonder in the world, still questions worth holding without rushing to answer. And now, as we leave this night behind and step into the day, I'll ask you, share this story if it spoke to you. Leave a comment about where you're listening from, and whether you've ever held something that felt like it carried a secret. And if you'd like to join me again for another journey into the hidden corners of history, subscribe. There are always more mysteries waiting just beyond the edge of the light, And as always, may the silence guide you through the past.